All right, welcome to Believe in Clemson Football. I'm Will Vandervoort. That's Alex Dodd. As we get you set for an open date. That's right, an open date. Clemson is off this week, and that's a good thing, though, in a way, Alex, for us, because we get to watch football all day and not have to worry about working or anything like that.
I know I can have the quad screen up all day and not
Yeah.
have to turn the quad screen off. Because I always turn the quad screen off when Clemson's playing. I'm only watching the Clemson game, not worried about whatever else is going on. But I can have quad screen all day. I might bring a second screen into the living room. Rachel's going to love me on Saturday.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the only screen I have is right in front of me, and it's the stadium I am at, and I do have my laptop going and stuff like that, of course, but it's not the same, But I'm not going to complain. I'm working in a football stadium, so I'm not going to complain about that whatsoever. But I do enjoy the open date and getting to watch a whole day full of college football. Man, I got my whole day planned. I'm gonna have wings,
Come on.
and I'm gonna have wings at lunchtime. Probably gonna pull up a steak on the grill around 4:00 or so in the mid-afternoon games, and have me a nice steak for the evening games with baked potato. Kind of got it all planned out, my friend.
I might do a little bit of ribs. I might get some ribs going. You're kind of inspiring me here.
Yeah,
Get
man.
some ribs. Get something in a gold can that has Rocky Mountain water in it, and just watch football all day. It kind of sounds like a good plan.
It's going to be fun, I tell you what. And we're going to have fun here today too, Alex. We really are, because we got one of my favorite guests. I've had him on this podcast before. Former Clemson head coach Tommy Bowden is going to join us to talk all things Clemson and also about his time at Clemson again. And Dabo Swinney, I kind of wanted to get him on here to talk about Dabo and also C.J. Spiller, because obviously Tommy Bowden played a big role in why those two guys are at Clemson right now. Because if it's not for Tommy Bowden hired Dabo Swinney, there is no C.J. Spiller. And if there's no C.J. Spiller and Dabo Swinney, then there probably is nothing that we've seen over the last 15, 16 years here at Clemson. So we're going to have Tommy Bowden come in. And I remember a couple years ago, Alex, he came to Clemson and they honored him, and he was in the Clemson Athletic Hall of Fame. That was great, man, to see Coach Bowden get honored like that and really kind of get his due, because he didn't get a chance to do that, by the way things ended.
Yeah, and he also, give credit where credit's due, reestablished stability in the Clemson program, and got the Clemson program back in a healthy place. And if that wouldn't have happened, then, this era of Clemson football would have never occurred. There wouldn't be 2 national championship trophies sitting in that facility without the stability that Tommy Bowden brought back to the Clemson football program as well.
Absolutely. So we got a lot going on. We're also going to recap Clemson's 48-31 win over Virginia as well. And we're going to talk about Clemson in the playoff rankings and where they are right now in the overall rankings, but we'll talk about what people are saying, projecting Clemson for the playoff rankings, which will be in a couple weeks from now. So we're going to get you all ready for that. But before we do that, I also want to remind you guys that, you can find the Believe in Clemson podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast. Also, Alex, it's on Sirius XM. So if you just type in Clemson, Believe in Clemson Football, you will get our podcast on Sirius XM as well. That's always cool.
Our podcast is really available anywhere that you get a podcast.
Absolutely, it is.
Whatever you're using, just search Believe in Clemson Football, and it's going to pop up. I mean,
absolutely,
we've got a wide distribution.
Absolutely, and we appreciate all you guys out there that listen to us each and every week, and we do appreciate you. Also, we appreciate, Alex, our sponsor, the Clemson Insider, for the most complete coverage of Clemson athletics recruiting. Go to ClemsonInsider.com, where we got pretty much everything about what you want to know today as far as Clemson had their press conference day. Nick Eason was over there, so we got stories on that. We talked to Dabo Swinney last night to kind of review the Virginia game and talk about the next couple weeks coming up and his views. I got a story about what Dabo Swinney's record is in the month of November and how good he's been in his time at Clemson. By the way, Alex, in case you didn't know that, 49-13 in the month of November.
Pretty salty.
Since Dabo Swinney's been head coach. And that is counting the 2008 season when he went 4-1 in that month and earned himself the job so he could be here. So winning in November is very important to Dabo Swinney because it gave him the job at Clemson. So that's there as well. So go over to the Clemson Insider Clemson.com. Check it out. Most complete coverage of Clemson athletics and recruiting. You can also find us on the X. You got it right this time.
There you go.
You can find us on X at Clemson Insider. Also on Facebook at the Clemson Insider page. And then you can find me at Steeler Will as well, talking about it. And it's on YouTube. Go to YouTube and you can find us. We're on Instagram as well. We're kind of everywhere. We're on Threads. We're everywhere. Anywhere there's social media, I believe we have a footprint of some kind. So go check us out at all those different places. We appreciate Robert and everybody over there at the Clemson Insider.
Yeah, Robert gave me a big part of my start here in my career, and lots of the Clemson Insider. There's still only one Clemson website that I read, and it's because it's the best one.
It is.
And you don't have to pay for it. It's free. There's some other good ones that you have to pay for, but the best one is free, and it's at theclemsoninsider.com.
Absolutely, and so please go check it out. If it's free, it's for me. That's my motto. So, and I was doing that last week, Alex. I was getting some free food, and I always take advantage of situations when people have offered me free food. I never say no, and you don't complain. I learned that from the great late Ken Berger of the Charleston Post and Courier. He told me when I was a young scribe, and I was kind of throwing my nose up at the lunchtime meal. He says, "Listen, they don't have to give us this. It's free food. You need to."
People have tried to take it away.
That's right, and he's like, "You need to appreciate it. They're doing this for you." And so, I was like, "Okay, he's right. Ken's right." And I have passed that along to every writer that comes in there that I hear complaining about the food. So, and really at Clemson, we don't complain too much about the food. Now, I will say there's other schools where you can complain about it if you want to, and I probably will let it slide.
Yeah, like where they give you a 3-day-old stale sandwich in a box.
Yes,
some like plain Lay's potato chips or something.
I won't say what school that is or anything like that. It's probably not the one you guys are thinking. But I'd love some guesses if you guys are out there and you want to guess what that school is. I'll tell you whether that's true or not. But if you want to throw that,
that's what the people care about. They want to know what the press box food scene is like in the ACC and beyond.
Yes, or if you have any other questions, we're sort of at the midseason, a little bit over the midseason. We'll be happy to answer questions about that. Also, if you want questions for Coach Bowden, he's going to be on here in about 2 or 3 minutes. So if you want any questions, Coach Bowden, please throw them in the comment section. I know on YouTube we can read your comments as well as on Facebook and Twitter. If there is a question, me and Alex will try to get it up as fast as we can if we have time, and we'll definitely answer those questions, and we'll throw it up there as well, even the ones for Coach Bowden. So please, we love for you guys to participate. So please participate and comment in the sections and we'll get those up as fast as we can. So, Alex, before we get Coach Bowden, I want to just get your thoughts real quick, and we'll go more in depth here in a little bit. But your thoughts on Clemson's 48-31 victory over Virginia last Saturday.
Yeah, another kind of slow start for the Clemson offense, just not able to find a rhythm early. A lot of that had to do with some overthrows and underthrows from Cade Klubnik, but they really settled in there in the middle quarters as Will claps at his dog to get his dog to settle in. They really settled in there in those middle quarters and pulled away. The final score doesn't really indicate the kind of game that it was, particularly in that third quarter. But when you have an off day and you still go for over 500 yards, it's a pretty good sign for your football team.
It is, and I apologize for the clap, but my dogs tend to love it when I go online and start doing anything, whether it's this podcast or working, and I'm doing press conferences or whatever. They decide that it's time to go wild, and so they always take advantage of the situation when I'm doing the podcast and everything. So anyway, I hope I got them straight. But anyway, I agree with you, Alex. Everything you said. I thought overall good win. Didn't play their best, but yet still racked up 500 yards. I thought the first team defense, and I don't know why some people are criticizing them. Virginia had one good drive that came off a turnover and then did nothing the rest of the game when it mattered, when the starters were out there. They had 172 total yards through 3 quarters, had less than 50 yards rushing, and Clemson was dominating the game. Clemson scored 35 straight points on Virginia. The game was not close. It was never in doubt. And I hear people all week like, oh, we're worried about the defense. This defense isn't a championship caliber defense. I'm like, what are you seeing? The last 3 weeks, I've seen them dominate.
I'm with you as well. I went back and watched the game again because I was doing some other things while the game was on. Because I had to, and I was getting paid to do, to work. I wasn't just not watching the game, I promise. Right. But I went back and watched it again, and I agree with you. And I think one thing that is really a strong suit of Wes Goodwin is what he's able to scheme up when a team is off script. So, first drive, a lot of times teams will script what's going to happen. We're going to run this, and if this happens, we're doing this. And they know, and they practice it all week and kind of know what that's going to look like. When they get off script, that's when Wes Goodwin's defenses really take it up a notch. I think you've seen that kind of the whole season. And, kind of saw that on Saturday too. Once Virginia got off script, there wasn't a lot of room on the field for them to make moves. The defense did have some trouble when Virginia went hurry up, getting set, and being ready for play. But I thought it was a pretty good game by the ones, and mostly by the twos for the Clemson defense. But we got kind of into the threes in that fourth quarter. Things didn't look too pretty.
That's when the problem started, and they gave up 21 points. The backups did, and they got to get better. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you want to know the difference the last couple of weeks when Clemson played Florida State and when Clemson played Wake Forest was the fact that really they only have so many people they can bring with them, and so really you didn't have to go too deep into your to get guys on the field like they do when they're at home, where they try to play as many of those young guys as they can. And you saw different. Now they did give up a couple. They did give up a late score to Florida State, and the guys were all mad about that. But last week against Wake Forest, they didn't give up anything. I mean, they shut Wake Forest down. And I heard one person say, "Well, it's because Clemson's schedule. Though, look who they're playing." And I'm like, but that works for the offense too. If you want to use that excuse for the defense, then you got to use that excuse for the offense too, because they're racking up 400, 500 yards a game against who they're playing. It's the same excuse. So you can't use that excuse for one and not the other. I don't use that excuse for the offense. I think the offense, no matter who they're playing, is going to move the football, and they're going to move it consistently, and they're going to score. I don't care who Clemson's playing right now because they've gotten that much better on offense, and they're playing with a lot of confidence. And I think Clemson's first-team defense is playing at an elite level. And if they play the big-time teams like they did against Georgia in the first week and they shut them out for a whole half, I think Clemson can hang with those teams too as well. And I think now that the offense is better, I think you'll play better against the Georgia because the offense is playing better. Because remember, on that day, it wasn't really the defense. It was the offense that didn't show up the whole game. The defense just decided to take the second half off, which we've seen as a theme, I guess. That's kind of what everybody's point is. But that was Georgia adjusting and doing some things, and I give Georgia a lot of credit for that in that second half. And as far as the Clemson defense goes right now, I'm with you. I think Wes does a good job. I know some people don't like him playing in zone, but if you're listening to me in the press box, I'm sitting there telling them to blitz. I like it when he plays press man and he plays a zone blitz kind of concept. I like it to when he brings an extra person instead of the front four. So I'm against those people that say don't press man, because when you press man, you're rushing the play. And so if they make a play, like the Virginia quarterback did last week when he ran on third down and long, he busted off a long run, and that got them down to the Clemson 17-yard line on 3rd and 17. I get it. That was, you tip your hats to him though. That was a good call by Tony Elliott. They ran the quarterback draw. It was the right call for that play. But what did he do the rest of the game? He didn't do anything.
Yeah, didn't do anything. And I'm with you too. I know they had some issues in man at times in the game, particularly with receiver Fields on Lucas. It's kind of a size mismatch, and credit Tony Elliott and staff for finding that when Clemson went to man. But if you also look at Jaden Lucas and look at the way he started the game and look at the way he finished the game, man, you could really tell he got better and better as the game went on in man coverage as well. And when you're bringing that kind of pressure, obviously you're going to give something up on the back end, but it forces a quarterback to make a really good throw. And Calandria wasn't a guy who's going to be able to do that consistently against you.
No, he's not. And also Clemson's not going to play guys that are 6'4", 220 pounds every week either. Until you get into the college football playoffs. I don't know if there's Miami may have one guy that can fit that bill. But, I mean, I just like Clemson's overall front seven. I think the linebackers are really stepping up and have gotten better every week. And I think the defense is really playing better overall. The defensive line definitely is playing much better. Especially when you see that they are, getting pressure sometimes without this week, for example, Clemson had a season high 4 sacks. They had more quarterback pressures than they've had all year long. And they really forced the issue with Calandria, really made him feel uncomfortable, did exactly what I said they needed to do, is keep him in the pocket and force him to have to make decisions, throwing the football instead of letting the ball out with his feet. Overall, good job by them. I thought the linebackers, Barrett Carter, I thought Wade Woodaz, both those guys, again, had big weeks. When he got in there, Sammy Brown was, again, was just right in there and, just killing it. And, so really pleased with the way the defense looked in those parts. Now, granted, the second, third teamers, they've got to get better. That was very disappointing for them. So it'll be interesting to see what Clemson does, moving forward there, and maybe getting some guys that they can count on, getting them better equipped to handle the things they're doing, or maybe just show them. And when you have this happen, guys, you can now show them film, and that's the big thing. Like, so now there's film on them, and they can look at what they've done wrong again, and you can coach them up better. So I had a freshman corner on that last touchdown, total bust on that play. That's totally on him. You can't have every guy. You got 10 guys doing what they're supposed to, but if one guy doesn't, then that's what happens. And then I believe that's what old John Grant, thanks, John, for getting in. Hampton needs more snaps at DB. He has been balling out when he's gotten the game, and we haven't seen him get beat yet. Probably so, but they may also be recruiting, saving him for a red shirt. So we'll see as we get in. Coach Bowden's going to be getting here in just a second. He's getting on with us right now. Alex, you can bring yourself back when you get a chance here. There you go. Alex, helping Coach Bowden get set up, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we had a little bit of technical difficulties. Sometimes our streaming service can get kind of funky, but usually pretty good.
There we go. We getting Coach there as he's setting himself up. Alan Watts says if you take away the 2 touchdowns that Virginia scored on our scrubs and the touchdown throw that Cade missed to Bringstorm, the game would not have been much worse. The game could have been much worse. 48-31 is pretty much worse already. I mean, Clemson was up, 38-10 in that game. So yes, you're right, Alan. But again, the final score wasn't indicative of what the game actually was. And, it is what it is. But, I get it. Everybody wants a shutout, but you can't get a shutout all the time.
Yeah, you're right, Will. We're going to bring in former Clemson head coach Tommy Bowden right now. We got him on the line. A little bit of technical difficulties, but it all worked out. Coach Bowden, how's it going?
Doing good. You didn't tell me I had to add an app. I'm 70 years old. I don't know how to add an app, but we got it.
We got to get a better producer for this show. I mean, this is like 3 weeks now that the producer has dropped the ball.
I'd never put you in charge of freshmen. I can tell you that right now.
No, don't do that. Coach, how are you, man?
Doing good. Appreciate y'all having me on.
Yeah, it's always good to have you, Coach. I know you've been on here before. When I did it with Levon a couple of years back, we appreciate you coming on then, and appreciate you joining us today. First of all, Coach, I need to ask, how's Miss Linda and how's the family?
Doing good. I've got 4 grandsons now, 2 of them in Atlanta, 2 of them in Mobile. My son Ryan lives in Atlanta, and my daughter Lauren lives in Mobile. And I never saw my children participate in sports or any activities because of being involved with coaching. You don't have time, so I'm being punished now and have to go to all my grandkids' games, soccer games, football games. They're getting me back.
Is that punishment though, Coach?
Well, no. No, it's not punishment. Why would you think that?
Well, hey, we appreciate you here, Coach. Coach, I want to, first of all, before we get too much into it, you mentioned Alex wouldn't be good with the freshmen, and I was talking about freshmen when you were coming in here because a lot of the fans are upset that these freshmen are giving up touchdowns when they come into the game here recently. But talk to me about why it's so important when you got opportunities to play those young players and get them on the field.
Well, in Clemson's position, they're going to need them down the line. Now, they can probably, as you noticed, they've averaged about 50 points a game after the Georgia game. They're going to be able to get through this ACC schedule until the championship game with Miami with these mistakes because they're that good. They're outscoring people. And toward the end of the year, when you need them, they're going to need them versus Miami. They're going to need them in the playoffs, but they'll have valuable experience. So if you can just take the bad with the good. You might see some mistakes and some poor play early, but simply because of experience. And the more experience they get, the better they're going to help you. Clemson, they need to look, and as he's doing, he's getting himself ready for the playoffs and for Miami and things to come. And I think it's a smart decision. Just be patient. Got to be patient with them, and that's hard to do in college football.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Coach, just how great is it that, as a head coach to be in the opportunity to be able to do that, to throw in the young guys late in the game? I think that's maybe something that people overlook with the frustration.
Well, it's really good because, number one, it really helps team morale. When those guys can play, it helps the overall morale of the team. So you're helping yourself in more ways than one. And right now, as dominant as Clemson has been, they can afford to not only play them just in mop up at the end of the game, but they can get them some quality reps earlier. Clemson's ending a lot of these games at halftime, so they're getting some quality reps, and it's very unusual that you'd be in that position. Right now, I don't think there's very few teams in the SEC. I know not Alabama, not even Georgia, that are afforded that opportunity. And toward the end, in this playoffs in the SEC championship game and Big Ten championship game, some of those guys will have to perform at a quality level. And thank goodness Clemson can do that right now. It's a great problem to have.
Coach, I want to ask you, because you mentioned the Georgia game earlier, and then since then Clemson's rolled off 6 straight, and they've looked really impressive doing it, especially on the offensive side. From your standpoint, what do you think has been the difference in Clemson's offense from that Georgia game to where they are right now, where they've had 5 straight 500-yard games?
Georgia's defense.
That's one.
It's pretty obvious. They're pretty good. Ask Texas, how good they are. But and Dabo's done a great. You can tell really, really good coaches, which he is. They've taken that loss and he's done what good teams do, what good coaches do: refocus them and make progress from week to week to week. But I think the problems now, if they were to play again, and they might in the playoffs, we're going to see, how much separation that Dabo has been able to create with improvement from his team. But what Clemson's offense, that kind of reminds me of the offenses that they had with Taj Boyd and Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, where they just really moved the ball up and down the field. And I think from watching them last year to this year, no doubt, I think Garrett Riley feels more comfortable. And then I think the quarterback feels more comfortable, has more experience. But they're starting to peak, and they're doing the things great teams need to do, is make improvement from week to week. And offensive performance is surely one of the reasons.
I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned Cade Klubnik there, and the quarterback position. It's such a fickle position in the sense of where a young man is in his confidence level, what's going on in his mind and what he's thinking, and what could be going on in his personal life too, for that matter. When you watch Cade, what's been the biggest difference that you've seen from him and how he's responded from last year now to being a second-year starter?
The one thing I've noticed, he looks a lot more comfortable. He doesn't look like he's forcing things. He makes a mistake. It seems like he dismisses it quickly, which a quarterback has to do. And I mentioned this earlier, I think also Garrett Riley looks a lot more comfortable, in his play calling. And then I'm sure his confidence in Cade, and then Cade's confident in the plays that are called. So really, I think Cade's progress goes hand in hand with the comfort zone that Garrett Riley now feels calling plays. And I think those two guys, you have seen the difference from year 1 to year 2. Now, they're both talented people. Cade's a really talented quarterback, and Garrett's a proven play caller. So that helps also. But again, I think that comfort zone from last year to this year is obvious with the relationship that those two have. Garrett and Cade's confidence, I think, has gotten grown in the course of the year.
Coach Bowden, wanted to ask you about that in particular. You as a play caller moved around a couple places in your career as a coordinator. How difficult was it to kind of adjust to personnel, and how much more comfortable are you in that second season in a role with your team?
I think you're a lot more comfortable, and the players are a lot more comfortable. I think a lot of things, too, is the comfort zone of the play caller and the head coach. Dabo stays active. Often you can see him with the headsets on, and you can just watch his mouth and when the play's called and all that. So there's also a comfort zone of the core play calling with the head coach. I'll give you another example, Mike Bobo. Now, if you offensive coordinator at Georgia, how comfortable is he with the defensive guy, Kirby Smart, who's always involved? They're going to stay on the headsets and listen to the play call. Is Mike Bobo calling plays to appease the head coach, or to stay involved with the game and to score points and don't play scared? And I think Garrett, not that Dabo has is going to scare somebody. He can. He's a tough old cuss. But I think a lot of it is Dabo's comfort zone and Cade's and Garrett's comfort zone with having Dabo on the headsets. And hey, I've been through this before. I'm gonna call this, and I think that not so much is the comfort zone of the players learn your system, which is awful important. But in this particular case, in a coordinator like myself that moved around at a different places, you also take that head coach's input into consideration.
Coach, I wanted to ask you about Matt Luke, and he was at Georgia when they won their first national championship. He obviously he was the head coach at Ole Miss and had a great career there, not only as a coach and head coach, but also as a player. Did you know Matt at all in your coaching days? Because I know he would have just gotten started when you were over at Tulane in the business, and your thoughts on him just from what you've noticed, even if you haven't met Matt.
I just know of his reputation, and I've seen video clips of him coaching. He's real aggressive, real loud, attention to detail, and you really have to be at that position. There's no doubt. I know when I got into coaching, my father said, son, if you want to make yourself marketable, learn two positions. The secondary, you coach 4 guys, a mistake back there is 6, and the offensive line. Obviously, being a skill guy, it was easy for me to latch on to the secondary and skill positions. It would have been tough adjustment to offensive line. But those guys are worth every bit of money, because you can't run our pass without those guys being productive. And him being an experienced guy. I'm a Thomas Austin guy. He played for me. Great family and great coach. Didn't have quite the experience as a guy like Matt. And offensive line now, a lot of people say, well, halftime adjustments. Halftime adjustments are awful important. But offensive line, you better come in there between series. Not so much. It's that second series. Okay, set your line out. What did they do? And now you get your running back coach, your coordinator on the phone. She say, okay, we need to do this. Their zone block. They're playing more slant and angling or stunting or twisting or whatever. And you have to make adjustments. Not at halftime. That's too late. And I think an experienced guy like Matt Luke does those type of adjustments quickly because of his experience. But he's good. Yeah. He's worth every bit of money you're paying him.
Yeah, I got to say that I think a lot of why we've seen improvement in Cade, it's almost like after that Georgia game, Dabo and Garrett sat Cade down and said, look, pay attention to what's going on in front of you. Your guys are giving you plenty of time. Sit there and trust your offensive line. And I think that's one of the differences is, Matt's got that offensive line playing so well, and Cade feels comfortable in the pocket.
Yeah, I've had many a discussion on the headsets during the game between the quarterback coach and the offensive line coach, because the offensive line says, hey, your quarterback's holding too long. Throw the ball, quit holding on to it. And then the quarterback coach said, he's in my face. He's off, he's making him step back. He can't follow through. So there's a lot of, he said, she said, your fault, this fault. So it's good that those guys are on the same page. And the more they work together, Matt Luke and Garrett Riley, they get those problems solved early during the game. But you have a tendency to throw that blame somewhere else. I've heard many of those discussions between the quarterback coach and line coach on whose fault it was that the guy was sacked.
Well, Coach, I kind of want to ask you about something else that happened this weekend off the field. C.J. Spiller one of your former players, one of the Clemson's all-time greats, gets inducted into the Ring of Honor. What's it mean for you to get to see him receive that honor and have his name in Death Valley forever?
Yeah, I remember during the recruiting process, one of the things that Dabo sold CJ on, we tried to sell him on was, hey, at Florida, where he was heavily lean, a lot of people thought he was going, he would have been another guy, just another guy. At Clemson, I think Dabo sold him on, hey, be your own guy, draw your own roadmap, and be something special at a place that you can make a difference. And he's done that at Clemson. Everything Dabo told him during the recruiting process has come true. And I don't know if he accumulates that degree of success and that honor at the University of Florida like he did at Clemson. So those things, I'm sure, were in the back of his mind. But to see him actually become fruitful and actually happen, Ring of Honor is a great honor. That's a great honor at Clemson. But he's very deserving. But I think those seeds were planted a long time ago by young assistant Dabo Swinney, and one thing he does, he builds trust with players, and he surely did that with CJ. Is very deserving, and CJ has paid his dues.
I want to ask you about that recruitment with CJ because Tommy said that the night before his announcement, he hadn't heard from him. I mean, Dabo, he hadn't heard from him. You hadn't heard from him. You guys were kind of nervous because he visited your daddy that weekend before in Tallahassee. And Dabo says he was worried you were going to fire him if he didn't sign.
Well, I was a little bit older, Dabo, and had been through that a lot of times. But the thing that I remember about that night was about 12 o'clock, I got a call from the assistant coach at Florida State that said, hey, everybody's got spies. We had spies, English teacher, assistant coach, everybody's got spies and accumulating different information and feeding it to the coaches. Well, Florida State's coach called me and said, hey, a white Cadillac just picked up, and it was Tim Tebow. They said Tim Tebow and Brandon Spikes is the names that I was told, just picked up CJ at 12 o'clock at night and driving around trying to persuade him about Florida. So, yeah, we couldn't, we would have had to call Tim Tebow to get a hold of CJ. now, how much that's true, I don't. I just know what I was told, and I know we couldn't get a hold of him. But I did approach the recruiting coordinator at the University of Florida when I saw him later. I said, hey, that's a little bit shaky picking that guy up at 12 o'clock at night and driving around. But they had an existing relationship, so it really wasn't illegal. But there was a lot of fear about him going. But I remember about 12 o'clock getting that call. So, I think I called Dabo immediately and said, well, what is going on? And if they don't answer the phone, you don't know. You got no idea if you don't get them on the phone.
Yeah, I think Dabo said it was around 2 a.m. that night or whatever that CJ called him and said, I'm still with you, coach. I'm still your guy. I'm gonna keep my word and all that. Did you believe it when Coach Swinney came into you that next morning and CJ did call him?
No, because we had a similar situation, but Dabo was recruiting a wide receiver out of Jacksonville the year before maybe, and he had committed to us, and all of a sudden Florida took him down there for Super Bowl weekend. And locked him up for a couple of days down there in Gainesville, and he decommitted. He didn't decommit. He just told Dabo, yeah, I'm good, I'm coming. And Florida had told him to say that so it wouldn't alert them, and he signed with Florida, and it crushed Dabo. I said, man, if you stay in long enough, that's going to happen. So there were visions of that scenario happening, and until 1 o'clock when he picked up that hat, I wasn't convinced.
Well, Coach, I'm sure that you've seen plenty of Tim Tebow around on the FCA circuit and other speaking engagements that you're at. Have you ever asked him if it's true that he picked up CJ in a white Cadillac?
I believe Tim was working out of the Old Testament during that recruiting night right there. Instead of love, grace, mercy, and forgiveness of the New Testament, I believe Tim was working from the Old Testament 48 hours before signing that. I've never seen him. I know he does a lot of Christian speaking like I do, but I surely hadn't seen him. I'd ask him about that because he might, I don't know, it might be one of his sins. He might lie about it.
Coach, what was your favorite play with CJ? I know he had a million of them. What was your favorite play that you could remember from CJ?
Probably that run against Georgia Tech over on the sideline. I think we threw him a little flare pass, and it was showed on ESPN a million times. I think Chan Gailey was the head coach, and they had him hemmed up. I don't know if you remember on the sideline, and he left one guy just in his shoes and made a move and sprinted down the sideline. That's probably one I can remember. It's been replayed so many times, but there's a bunch of them. He had so many long runs because of his great speed, but that particular play stands out, I think, because it was played so many times. And there's no way. It's like he's a magician. How did he get out of it? And I know Chan Gailey was right there, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Chan Gailey was the head coach of Buffalo Bills and drafted CJ. Would that be right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And I'm sure that play, he hadn't forgot that play either because he signed him, I think, 10th in the first round, 10th pick. But that would be one that stands out. But there were a lot of them.
Yeah, there's that. I still look at that play and I still can't believe how he did that. I just, to this day, I can't explain it. Even when I watch it, and I've watched it a million times like you, I saw it in person live, and then I've gone back and watched it a million times, and I still like, how did he do that? I asked CJ how he did it, and he said he don't know. He just did it.
I know. I know CJ is a godly man, and no doubt it's a godly gift. They say you sign a tailback, you coach a fullback. You usually get them great ones, and you just kind of line them up. You don't do a lot of coaching with the great ones, and that's not something that we worked on. And I'm sure Burton Burns would take credit for it, or Andre Powell, who had him at the time. But those are God-given skills.
How great is it to see CJ now in the coaching role and giving back and being a part of the profession?
Well, he's got a lot to give back. He's his experience, the experiences that he lived and participated in are just unbelievably beneficial to a young player, especially a freshman coming in. Everybody was stars in high school, and you don't get to play, and you're looking for a shoulder to cry on. He's been through all of that, and he's endured it. So it's just great talent. But, my experience with NFL guys coming back to college, they get paid a lot of money, and they don't want to start at the bottom working their way up, and for him to do that shows a lot of patience and perseverance on his part, and shows his dedication to the profession, because a lot of them tried, and they said, nope, this is not for me. I got money in the bank, and I'm not putting in these kind of hours. But it says a lot about his character and his dedication to the profession.
Well, Coach, I want to ask you about another guy that was like CJ in the sense of you never knew what he was going to do, when he was going to do it, and that was one Woodrow Dantzler. You got to coach him from 99 to 2001. If you could, just talk to me about Woody and what he was and how electrifying he was.
It was a perfect storm for Woody Dantzler because he's a very talented player, and he can throw the ball a lot better than what people maybe thought he could do. And we were with Rich Rodriguez, and what we were doing offensively, it was tailor-made for a guy like him. And we were kind of on the cutting edge of some of the things we were doing with fast pace, no huddle. We really weren't in the RPOs at that time, but some naked boots out of the gun with the quarterback and some running plays. We definitely added running plays with him. But, to be the first guy in the history of the NCAA to throw for 2 and run for 1, that's special. And yes, we had a good offense, but 2, he was very, very talented. Or we had an offense that was catered to his skill level. But still, you have to be able to produce when your numbers call. And the thing he did, and like I say, a lot of people didn't give him credit for, was his throwing ability. He was a really good passer. So, great. And then he was a great leader. He never in trouble, no red flags. He was the perfect teammate and coachable guy. And he played it, and he had those characteristics at a position, where you need it the most. Ask Florida State. Florida State missed on that position in the portal, and they're paying for it.
When you look at Woody, I remember 2 games in particular, and still to me, they're the 2 greatest games I've seen a quarterback produce back-to-back like that, in college game, I should say, because not only did he did it with his arm, but with his leg too. And that was the Georgia Tech game in 2001, and then the very next week what he did against NC State and setting an ACC record and all that stuff. Do you remember those 2 games, and how special was it?
I remember because you call a play and they can't tackle him, and yeah, we had some great design runs for him, but still you only got 10 blockers and they got 11. they're always going to have an unblocked guy somewhere. He's got to make a guy miss. He made a bunch of guys miss. I specifically remember against Georgia Tech, I think it was overtime. Mueller might have been on the 25. It might have been 3rd down and long. And we called a quarterback draw, and they happened to be in 2 deep man, which is the perfect coverage. You could put hats on everybody. And I think we ran a quarterback draw. He scored for maybe 20 yards out, I think, to win it in overtime. But yeah, those 2 games back to back, it really made him a nationally marketable Heisman candidate at that particular time. They were back to back, a lot of highlights from coast to coast. And those 2 games that you mentioned, man, are sure that I remember. That one play against Georgia Tech, I just remember vividly talking about it and the call versus 2 deep. Mike O'Kane, I think, was offensive coordinator. Mike O'Kane called the play, and it was a great call.
Yeah, the call. The Clemson calls it the Hail Mary run because it was just like, I think it was way out there, and it didn't, the chances of you guys scoring it without throwing seemed slim to none, right? And then Woody just is Woody and just made an unbelievable play like he did all the time during those days.
I think that was one of those conversations with your offensive coordinator and head coach is, you called what? What are you doing? Oh, good call. What are you doing calling that play? Yeah, it was one of those things when you change your mind about half as he's running into the end zone to win the game.
Love it. Also wanted to ask you, Coach, about this guy that play quarterback, Charlie Whitehurst. Your memories from him, because Charlie obviously wasn't Woody in the sense that he's not going to run 70 yards every time down the field, but he could sling it like nobody's business. One of the best quarterbacks Clemson's ever had.
Tougher than nails. Of course, he had good DNA with his dad being in the pros, so he had some of that in his blood. But still, you got to go out there and do it on your own. And boy, I remember, I think it was the Duke game, and Willie Simmons, who is like a son to me. I still talked to him yesterday, and just a great guy, and heavily recruited out of Quincy, Florida. And I had to call him in and say, listen, I got to make a change. I'm sorry. I've got to go with Charlie Whitehurst. And it just killed me. I hated that conversation. And I think Charlie's first start, I believe, was either against Duke or North Carolina.
I believe it's Duke. Yeah.
Duke. And he might have thrown for 300 yards. And I think it was in Durham. But I remember that. Setting up, that transition, which is awful difficult for any head coach, especially a guy like Willie Simmons that meant so much to the program and just a class guy and a great coach. And then Charlie's immediately, you look better as a head coach when you make the change and they go throw for 300 yards. It's a little bit easier. You don't have to face the media, if he goes out there and lays an egg. But Charlie very seldom. I don't know if he ever laid an egg. He was a very talented player.
And he was a big game player. Charlie seemed to always made those plays in the biggest of games, whether it be South Carolina against Miami. It didn't matter. He was a big game guy, it seemed like.
Cool as a cucumber. He just never, you saw him never flustered. If he had a bad play, he shook it off. Great leader, never in trouble, just did everything right. But you're right. He played best in the big games, and just a great player, and won a lot of games for Clemson. Four in a row versus, I think he's been maybe the only another quarterback. He beat South Carolina 4 years in a row, which is unusual.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up. Alex, that's a great transition for us. Charlie was 4-0 against the Gamecocks, but Coach, you were 7-2-1 against the Gamecocks. I don't know if you know this, but
we never tied. We
never tied. My bad. That's a typo on my part, Coach. 7-2.
Hey, I need all the wins I can get. Don't give me a tie.
7-2. My bad, Coach. 7-2 against the Gamecocks, but your win percentage is a Clemson record against rival South Carolina. Your thoughts on that, and then I'm going to throw it out there. It's not like you were playing just anybody as the head coach. You were playing, Hall of Famer Lou Holtz and Hall of Famer Steve Spurrier.
Yeah, people ask me, if you had to do it over again, what would you do different? I said, if I had to do it over again, when I was at Clemson, I would have gotten involved with scheduling and I would have dropped Wake Forest and played South Carolina twice. If I could have done that, I still might be there. But yeah, I hit it at a time where Lou Holtz, Hall of Fame coach, Steve Spurrier, a Hall of Fame coach. So, and it's not like we were getting better in talent. We still weren't going out there with dominant talent over South Carolina. They were about as talented as we were, but we always got up for South Carolina. It was a big game. I knew it was a big game, and shoot, I might have won more bowl games had I not put more emphasis on South Carolina. But you can live for one more year and get one more year in your contract usually if you beat South Carolina.
Alex, you're muted. Coach, what do you think that rivalry means to? Can you hear me now? All right. Yeah. Coach, what do you think that rivalry means, not just to Clemson and South Carolina fans, but in the scheme of college football? Obviously, you've been a part of some great rivalries, Florida State, Alabama, Auburn. What do you think the Clemson-South Carolina rivalry means on the national picture?
Yeah, I have been a big part of a lot of them. It's nationally, sometimes it doesn't get as much because it's not like a number 2 playing a number 3. Sometimes we were both struggling and we weren't ranked high, so it didn't get the national attention. But I will say this: the most cold-blooded rivalry that I was involved in was the Alabama-Auburn. It was just mean. It was murder. I mean, in-state rivalry, no pro sports in the state of Alabama. And South Carolina had some of that, as Clemson, some of that same vitriol. No pro sports in the state. This is it. In-state rivalry as opposed to Ohio State, Michigan, out of state, or Georgia, Florida, out of state, where you got to cross state lines. You work beside your enemy 365 days. If you're in a cubicle, the guy next to you in the cubicle is South Carolina, Clemson. So it was as much 365-day hatred as any of the ones other than Alabama, Auburn. I'd put those on the same course of rivalry games.
When you got the job in '99, how long did it take you to understand that rivalry was on course with Alabama, Auburn?
It didn't take me long. I had to lose one. You don't realize the importance until you lose one. And I remember after I lost one, I don't think I ever lost 2 in a row. I lost one. I remember after losing the first one, it was a year later. I was in the hotel checking my room with the team before the game. And one of them IPTAY guys that might have had just a little bit of firewater said, he looked at me and said, the last time a coach lost 2 in a row to South Carolina, he ain't here anymore. It was then that I knew it was a big game, but you really don't understand the significance until you lose one. And I think I might have beaten my first 2 and then lost one. I'm not sure exactly.
That's correct.
But when you lose one, you understand how big it is.
Yeah, with that said, which one stood out? Which one stands out of those 7 wins against them? Which one stands out? I think I know what you might say, but I'm gonna just let you say it.
There's probably 3. There's 3 of them. The first year I was there, I believe we had to win the game to go to a bowl game, and we had to beat them to let them go 0-11. They were 0-10. If we beat them, they go 0-11. We go to a bowl game. I think we played them in Columbia. If I'm not sure. That's the best of all. You're going to a bowl game, they don't win a game. You're the guy that did it. That one I remember. The Rod Gardner one, where the South Carolina defensive back pushed off on Rod Gardner and he caught the ball. That South Carolina guy thought he was getting away with a push off, and Rod Gardner caught it. And then, of course, the 63-17 in Columbia, where at halftime it was just Clemson fans. Those 3 kind of stick out.
Oh man, that's great. It kind of, you talk about the cubicle to cubicle kind of in that rivalry. It reminds me of something I remember from my childhood with my dad and one of his coworkers that was a South Carolina fan. Is the year that Charlie beat the Gamecocks to make it 4 in a row, and they put a picture of a turkey, but they made it to be like a chicken, and they had a picture of you with a fork and a knife over the chicken that they put on his cubicle. So that kind of, I think, pictures the hatred there.
I can remember I think beating them that first year, and I was doing an interview down underneath the stadium where we did them, and they have that rooster crow, that rooster, that real loud thing. And I knew what it was, but I was telling our reporter, I said, is that a crow? What's that noise I keep hearing? Is that a crow making some kind of noise? I know he was getting mad at me. I knew exactly what it was.
No, yeah. I wanted to ask you, because we mentioned Charlie was 4-0, but then another game that stood out was not only his last game where you guys had the 1st and 35 and you came down the field and won the game, but also a couple years later, Buchholz makes the field goal as time expires in 2007. Can you talk about that game and how nerve-wracking that was? Because that was the first time since 1987 that it was a ranked Clemson team against a ranked South Carolina team.
Yeah. I remember Mark Buchholz because he was a soccer player, and we got him before the season. Very cool, demeanor guy. I just remember his coolness before the kick. But close game, we got it. The thing, if I'm not mistaken, I remember about that game that surprised me. Steve Spurrier was the head coach, I believe. They had a 3rd and 3. And they ran maybe the 45-yard line or somewhere around there. They ran the ball, and 3rd and 3 or 4. I said, "What are you doing? You're Steve Spurrier. Throw the ball, get it. Y'all can win the game." But he ran the ball and counted on his defense to win the game. And that I was on the sideline. I said, "Man, please don't throw it. Please don't throw it." Steve Spurrier, he's a great with the pass game. He'll have a great call, pass it, And then when he ran the ball on like a 3rd and 3, I said, "Oh man!" They punted the ball. We got the ball, went down there and scored. But I thought he would put the ball in his hands as a play caller. And I thought he would say, "Okay, I win this thing. We're going to throw this in. Well, the game's going to fix and be over. We get this 1st down." But he ran it, played safe, punted the ball, and we went down and scored. I do remember that scenario right before that kick.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of fans on here in the comments are kind of reaching out to you here and telling you thank you for everything that you did for Clemson. Removed from your tenure at Clemson, just what does Clemson mean to you? I know you've talked about it several times. You've talked about it on this show before, but what did Clemson mean to you in your career and to your family?
Well, I just remember taking the job, and I know I said this at my press conference. As a young coach, bounced around, spent a lot of time in the SEC. I said, there's 8 jobs I'd love to get if I'm ever fortunate. At that particular time, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, because I thought that was a great recruiting state, and they were the state school in North Carolina, and Clemson. Clemson, the only school in the ACC with an SEC environment. Man, they won a national championship. If I can ever get one of those jobs. So for me, it was a destination job. It was a dream job. Every coach's dream is to do what Dabo's doing. That was my goal, my dream, and it was trying to do something like he's doing. Didn't do it, but both my children graduated from there. They're both very successful professionally because of that Clemson education. They had great high school experiences. They had great college experiences. And what a great place to coach. I mean, man, of course, where you get a little disappointed is that the best thing you did for Clemson was leave. And Dabo comes in and does a great job. So, you'd like to be known other than the guy that hired Dabo, but to feel like you were part of it. And it was a great 10 years. I lived at a great place, Lake Hartwell. Clemson's a great college town, very similar to Auburn, Tuscaloosa, small college towns, West Virginia, Morgantown, where I went to school. Every coach's dream is go to a place where it's important. And it's important there. And that's where you want to coach. So, man, I was lucky to accomplish a dream, to coach at a dream school for me.
I wanted to ask you, you brought up Dabo, and you're the reason he came to Clemson. How, he's got a job where he's doing commercial real estate. He's making $450,000, $500,000 a year. At that time, assistant coaches weren't making that much money. They were, I think, 120, if that, at the time. And how did you talk Dabo Swinney into leaving a job where he's going to make almost $400,000 less than he's was making at the other job?
Well, he sent me his resume, and I looked at the resume, very impressive resume. And then I interviewed actually 2 walk-on wide receivers at Alabama that I coached, a guy named T.J. Weist and Dabo. And at that particular time, I was going through a professional direction of the road where, hey, you can go with experienced coaches that are play callers. You can go recruiters. The team of the best players usually wins. And I made a point at that particular time. I made some staff adjustments and went and hired Billy Napier, who's a pit bull recruiter like Dabo, and to hire recruiters. I'd rather have a great player, and we can get him close enough in a position to win. So he wanted to come. I say if he didn't send his resume, and I wouldn't have hired him. But I did have an existing relationship with him. The one thing I can remember, and I might have mentioned it before, I knew he was a godly man, and I was speaking at First Baptist Church in Tuscaloosa when I coached there. I went back there and spoke there. Maybe it was a head coach at Tulane at the time, and he came, and Kathleen came, and they waited till all my friends, all that stuff kind of filtered out toward the end. Him and Kathleen waited. And I remember that. I didn't hire him because he was a Christian, and I didn't hire him because of that. But that was one of the pieces of the puzzle. I knew his wife, and I just thought he would be a great addition. And he could recruit. That's why I hired him, because that joker is a recruiting Jesse. And he has surely proved that. He's elevated Clemson mainly because of his recruiting ability.
I remember you telling me years ago that when you hired Dabo, it was important that you also hired the wife. Can you explain what that means? What do you mean by that? So the fans get an idea what you meant by that.
Well, the way that our society's gone, there's a lot of single parent homes, and there's a lot of kids and high school prospects that are raised by their mothers. And when their mothers come with them on an official visit, you got to make them feel comfortable. They want to see that their son is taken care of. And who better to do that than a head coach is a salesman? We all got the same spiel, and we go fast, talking 100 miles an hour. But when you can sit the mother alone with a head coach's wife or an assistant coach's wife, Connie Burns was another great recruit. Other coaches' wives that were good, but Connie Burns was just great at this, Burton Burns' wife. But Kathleen's one of those women that could make another woman say, yes, they're going to take care of my son. I think that mother needs that confirmation that she gives her son to you for 4 years, that you're going to treat him like your own son. And Kathleen has that ability. And I can remember talking to Terry Don when he came and told me he's going to make a change. That's one of the selling points I was telling him. I said, Kathleen is a big part of the reason I think you should hire Dabo, because of what she brings to the table. It's awful important, and it might have been one of the reasons that Dabo made him interim. I don't know.
Yeah, Coach, we also wanted to ask you, Dabo passed your father, Bobby Bowden, as the all-time winningest coach in the history of the ACC. What was it kind of like for you seeing that happen, and a guy that you brought on your staff that obviously had great respect for your father and credited him for helping him as a young coach? What did it mean for you to see that happen a couple weeks ago?
Well, I think the most important thing to my father, had he still been here, and my family, and even myself, is that there's a lot of Christian coaches out there. I don't know all of them like I know Dabo, maybe Mark Rick, and some others, but Dabo's a guy that wears on his sleeve like my father does. He's vocal at times when it's appropriate. He doesn't run from it, and doesn't hide from his Christian faith. My father was like that also, and I thought it was good that the transition from the winningest coach went from one godly man to another godly man. It's important to at least to my family and myself. It was, and I say, and there's other Christian coaches in the ACC. I'm not saying there's not, but there's a guy that's very vocal about it, like my father. So I thought that's only appropriate that God get involved and name Dabo and get Dabo. So okay, we're gonna give it to Dabo, Coach Bowden. Here's folks like you. So that was awful meaningful, at least to me and my family.
Yeah, Brett Taylor, who is a Florida State fan, by the way, he reached out to us on YouTube. He wanted to know, to refresh the memories on how you and your dad encouraged Dabo when he was first hired. And Dabo kind of talked about that last week to us, Tommy, in the media, about how much your dad meant to him, and how he came up to him the week after, or a couple weeks after the game and his first game, and talked to him about how he was supporting him and you were supporting him, and Dabo talked about what that meant to him to hear that from you guys and the Bowden family. So I guess that's kind of what Brett's asking, your side of that, and what you remember.
Well, at that particular time, my father and Joe Paterno were the two goats. Nick Saban hadn't arrived yet, and they were battling out. My father at that particular time might have been the winningest coach. Paterno at that time might have been second. So I think to get the endorsement and the encouragement of a guy like him, I'm sure it gave Dabo, because there's always going to be speculation. When your assistant gets the job, what did he do? Well, he didn't do anything. So I think my father just kind of reconfirmed that to Dabo. Hey, listen, you'll do a great job. Tommy had a great run. There's nobody that I would rather see do it than you. Probably made him feel pretty comfortable at that particular time of his career. Because Dabo, like I said, never been a head coach, never really been a coordinator like a Lincoln Riley bounce around or Neil Brown or Brent Venables. So I'm sure he wanted some confirmation I can get the job done. And maybe at that particular time, that was a shot in the arm that Dabo might have needed from confidence.
Coach, on a completely different note, in a couple years ago, UCF claimed a national title for their undefeated season that ended with a bowl win. Have you ever thought about going back to Tulane and saying, "Hey guys, can you maybe help me out a little bit? Give me a national championship ring for what you did there when you went 12-0?"
Yeah, I did that 3 years ago. Went down and got my ring changed to national champion. No, I've had a lot of conversations about that. The things I remember at that particular time, I'd been in the SEC for about 9 years. I understood what it means to go to the Swamp, to go to Starkville, to go to Auburn, to go to Tuscaloosa, to go to Knoxville, back to back to back to back. I didn't have to face that at Tulane. Yeah, it's all comparative. My talent was equal to the talent I was playing. But I just didn't think I deserved to be in it I didn't think the strength of schedule merited it. Now, after the game was played, my father was down to his third team quarterback. I think Tennessee might have won 13-10 or 17-10, something like that. I believe that Tulane team, because of what we did offensively, would have scored more points and might have won the game. We might have been the best team because Florida State was down. Quarterback's such a crucial. We had a great quarterback. And Sean King, we were doing things on the cutting edge offensively. We might have won that game. I know we would have played them a better game. That's the only really memories I have of that. I didn't think we deserved it at the time because of strength of schedule. I'm a big strength of schedule guy when it comes to those playoffs and who's going to get those positions. And I just didn't think we merited it from that standpoint.
Now, Coach Bowden, I get this from Tim Beret, and Tim well, as I do. You and Danny Ford are the only coaches that have coached Clemson 10 or more years to never have a losing record during your tenure. And then you and Dabo are the only two coaches in the history of Clemson football to have at least 8 consecutive winning seasons in a row. I don't know if you knew those stats, but just to know that, what's that mean to you in your time at Clemson and what you were able to do there?
Yeah, that the longest you're out of coaching, you realize how hard that is because of injuries, guys transferring, guys quitting. Of course, the transfer portal has made it really, really difficult to do that. But yeah, I haven't heard those stats, but makes me feel a little more relevant as I get older. But it's really, really hard to do. Along those lines, my father's got a 14 top 5 finishes in the AP poll. It will never be done again simply because of the transfer portal. He had 7 quarterbacks back to back that played as redshirt juniors and seniors. Charlie Ward won the Heisman. Winky, who won the Heisman. Casey Weldon came in second for the Heisman. I could go on down all 7 of them. But nowadays, those guys would be gone. And so getting 8 wins in a row, it's getting harder and harder simply because of the transfer portal. But I wasn't aware of that. But I knew I started to like Coach Ford more and more. And I will say this, there's a lot of Clemson people on here. I met with Coach Ford, the first guy I met with when I took the Clemson job. And I can say this, the 10 years I was there, 9.5 years I was there, I never once, it's a small town, heard of negative criticism coming from Danny Ford while I was the head coach. That doesn't happen. I've been at other schools where that's happened. And so that was I really appreciate Coach Ford for that. But I think it's a lot of credit to his character.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, because Dabo says this all the time, and fans chuckle when he says it, but he's being serious. It's hard to win. And
Yeah.
Dabo always says the fun is in the winning, and you need to dance and celebrate whether you win by 40 points or you win by 1 point. You know, can you talk to him? Can you talk to us about that? Why, what he means when he says, you know, how hard it is to win in football?
Well, there's a lot of parity. There's more parity now, but you know, I just remember when I first went to Clemson. I'm not mistaken, we had one player drafted in the first 3 years. I think it was Rod Gardner. First year, nobody, then Rod. Then I don't think we had anybody. It might have been two. You know, you got to build that up. Eventually, I think we had the second ranked class in the nation when we signed Daquan Bowers. Then after that, we started to get better. I lost to Florida State 4 years in a row. Then we beat them 4 out of 5 because of talent. Now there's a lot of parity. It's like I said, to win now, it is hard to win, especially on the road. And now with the transfer portal and you can restock immediately, it is hard to do. And Dabo's right, you know, and the fans really don't like to hear that. They're paying you a lot of money to win by bigger than 3 points or 7 points or 10 points. But winning is hard, and they need to appreciate the wins. Unfortunately for Dabo, he has set the standard so high, you know. He set the standard so high with Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, Todd Boyd. You go through all those great quarterbacks he had, and if they don't win by 40 and win 10 or 11 or 12, they get mad. And he did it to himself. He got nobody to blame but himself. Those wins are hard to get.
Coach Bowden, what's it like for you seeing college football going into this, you know, major college football going into the playoff with 12 teams this year, and kind of, I feel like it's created kind of a higher sense of intrigue in the regular season, which I was pretty skeptical of going into it. But what's it like for you to see major college football going into this era?
Well, you know, every time they say it's not the money, it's the money. You know, they always make decisions to generate more income, and things are getting more expensive. So I like it, but it creates more interest. Not who's going to be the top 2 or who's going to be the top 4 or who's going to be the top 6, who's going to be the top 12. And it creates a lot more excitement for other teams. You know, now you'll get some people in the playoff that would never have been in there. And the enthusiasm at those schools across the country, it is great for college football. It really is. The enthusiasm, the attendance at games, the television market. Unfortunately, the portal and NIL is trying to ruin it. But going to the 12 right now, going to a 12-team playoff, it's fun to watch. You know, and now we're getting to the stage halfway during the season, things going to start taking shape and form. Oh, okay, they're going to make it. They're going to make it. Who's on the bubble? It just creates a lot more excitement. It's a joy to watch. I really enjoy watching. I enjoy Saturdays. I didn't like them coaching. I like them now.
I want to ask you why you talk about that, because this is an interesting scenario that could play out for teams like Clemson and Georgia and teams that make it to their conference championship games. You know, their rival is a non-conference rival at the end of the year. For Clemson, that's South Carolina. So let's say Clemson has clinched a berth in the playoff, in the ACC championship game, knowing, Coach, that if they win, they got the automatic berth into the playoff. How do you approach, if you're Dabo, how do you approach that South Carolina game, knowing that in the grand scheme of things, it really
turn my light on. I can hear
you. Coach's light went off.
That's live. Yeah, that's live TV.
Yes, live. That's right. It's live blog.
Go ahead and finish your question.
Yeah, how would you handle that scenario, knowing that in this scheme, if Clemson clinches a berth into the championship game, they can get that by winning that game in the ACC championship. They get that automatic berth. How can they, how do you handle that as a coach, knowing you got that South Carolina game in between that really in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter?
I think it's definitely, I think you're going to see some of the NFL filter down in that regard. Your quarterback, a great defensive lineman or a rush in, a tailback, some of those great skill guys that make a difference, that are game changers. Oh, I think you would definitely contemplate their playing time or how much playing time, or if you're going to try to not rush them back, that's the wrong term to use, but try to play him when the doc says, hey, he can play, he really needs another week, he's not going to injure himself anymore by playing, but boy, if he had another week. I think situations like that, where you are guaranteed a playoff spot, you're going to see your high profile players sit out to get to the playoff. The objective, now the national championship is more important than the conference championship. So I think you'll see some coaches make that decision.
Yeah, it's definitely a different time in college football. You've been in this sport for a long time, and you've been an analyst and you've been a coach. How nice is it on Saturdays now to just sit down and you can watch 4 games at once on YouTube TV and just enjoy college football on a Saturday?
If I'd have known it had been like this, I'd been. I had no idea that you could start watching. I'm on Central Time, so 11 o'clock you can start watching games till 11 o'clock. For 12 hours, you can sit on the couch and eat. And if a game somebody's losing, you can flip the channel and go to the next one. You can get up and. I mean, if I'd have known that this was this much enjoyable, I said, man, I might have got out a little bit earlier. But it's just some great games, man. There were great games last week, and every week there's going to be great games. I enjoy it. And I'm at this time in my life when I can enjoy it. Thank goodness my health is good, and I got a wife that'll put up with me. But I really enjoy it.
Years ago, Alex, Coach Bowden came up to me because he saw I was getting a little heavy, and he says, Will, I just want you to know I like to eat every bit as much as you do, but I do this thing while I run. That way I can eat whatever I want to. Coach, you can't do that if you're sitting on the couch for 11 hours, 12 hours straight on a Saturday afternoon.
If you work out 3 hours a day on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you can sit all day Saturday. And that's what I do, just to sit all day Saturday and eat. I run to eat. That's all I do. I run to eat.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling him that years ago. I sometimes follow that advice. Sometimes I get lazy and I don't. So anyway, Coach, man, I tell you, we've had a lot of people on here talking about how much they love you and they love what you did at Clemson and appreciate you for everything you do as a man, as a football coach, and all those things, man. And we appreciate you two being on this podcast, man. It's been great having you on here as always, Coach, and I've enjoyed it.
Well, let's do it again. I really appreciate what y'all do for Clemson, what you do for college football. You make it exciting and entertaining. So thanks for having me on. Let's do it again.
All right, Coach. Thanks so much. That's former Clemson head coach Tommy Bowden joining us. We appreciate Coach joining us there. Alex, man, just as always, man, Coach Bowden is the best, dude. Man,
Coach Bowden is salt of the earth, and his sense of humor makes for a great time anytime you talk to him. Kind of one thing I wanted to mention while we had Coach Bowden on today was, when I was getting into the business in middle school, I had met a guy that worked for the ACC Digital Network. It was just like their YouTube, and they did the halftime shows when the games were on Raycom. And that was when Coach Bowden was at Raycom. Doing halftime show for the ACC, I guess the previous iteration of what, like the Huddle and these shows on the ACC network are now. And I walked through the studio while they were doing stuff on Saturday and met Coach Bowden and gave him my business card that I'd made as a 12-year-old. And 3 days later, it was a 2-minute meeting. Three days later, Coach Bowden had sent me an email talking about how great it was to meet me and wishing me luck in my career. And I think that story kind of describes, the character of Coach Bowden and who he is as a person, that he would take the time to do that.
Absolutely, man. And I said this many times on here, Coach Bowden, just like Dabo, Dabo's the story with us. He loved his beat writers, and he would always, he would do things to make sure we got information first. Whether it be, a press conference or something like that, or a coach outing or something, he wanted us to make sure we were getting what we needed first before he gave it to the national media. Dabo follows that same trait and appreciates his beat writers and loves us the way Tommy did. And Tommy was great with it, man. And, to this day, when we used to see him at AC Media Days, Alex, he'd always come in, and he loved to pick at me about my weight, which is fine. I need somebody to give me accountability. And, even if
That's
I was
why we got
weight,
the angle in the show to be like,
right.
Just from here up. because we look like we're pretty fit guys from here up, I think.
Yeah, exactly. We look like it. Yeah. And so he'd love to give me a hard time. Even if I was doing well, he'd still give me a hard time just to keep me to keep me humble. And, and so he's good, but he always came over and said, hey to us and checked on us. And, just, man, he was fun. I enjoyed working with Coach Bowden every much as I have working with Dabo Swinney. I've been lucky, man. I got to work with 2 coaches in my whole career, 20 years at Clemson, and it was Tommy Bowden for about 6 or 7 years, and then of course Dabo ever since for the last 16. So it's been great, man.
Yeah, there are a lot of great coaches, like Tommy Bowden was saying. There are a lot of coaches that are men of faith. They're coaches that go out of their way to take care of their media members, but there's a lot of coaches that don't. So there are a lot of places where the local media is looked at as a pest or as a nuisance, and Clemson has been fortunate to have guys that didn't have that same perspective and really looked out and took care of their media members.
Yeah, I know John Grant's over on Facebook says that Trevor Price, Bowden used the transfer portal for him. That was Tommy West, not Tommy Bowden, that got Trevor Price. And yes, Trevor Price was a big one. I think he came from Michigan, I believe, and man, he was a great get for Clemson. And the only bad thing about Trevor Price is he played for the Ravens. Other than that, he was great. Nate Wiggins, I feel the same way about now. And Trent Simpson. But anyway, man, what a great show. Great having Coach Bowden on, and guys, we appreciate you guys. We're getting a lot of people, commenting and telling us they appreciated the video, the interview with Coach Bowden. We appreciate you guys watching. Alex, real fast before we get out of here, though, Clemson is ranked number 9 this week in the polls. Let's talk a little bit about before we get here why that's important. Because the Tigers, they beat Virginia to move to 6-1 overall, and now are, sitting in that ranking at number 9. And why that's important, Alex, is because now the Tigers are positioning themselves for not a berth in the ACC championship game by winning the ACC championship, but as a possible at large. That's why being ranked in the top 10 now, if they can stay there all the way up to the ACC championship game, I think if Clemson, because I had a lot of people ask me this, well, what if Clemson goes to the ACC championship game but loses to Miami? Do they still get in the playoffs? I'm saying yes. If Clemson goes 11-1 in the regular season and Clemson's in the top 10, which they'll be in the top 6 probably if that's the case, I think Clemson's not – a loss to Miami is not going to knock Clemson out of the playoff.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also, though, I probably put that safety zone a little higher. I probably put that safety zone, like you're saying, at the top 6. Really,
they
top 5
gotta
would be super safe. So the top 6 is kind of where you want to be because if you lose, you're expected to fall, a couple spots. And historically, Clemson's fallen a little bit more than maybe some of its peers in the polls when they've lost. But that's kind of that safety zone. Clemson controls its own destiny. We talked about this after the Georgia game when a lot of people were, maybe a little bit in panic mode, and rightfully so. It was an ugly game for Clemson. But Clemson controls its own destiny, and it's shown that, it's capable of running the table with its schedule. Now, there's still some games in front that, make you maybe a little worried if you're a fan. Like the Pitt game on the road, or maybe just having to go to the road and play in a hostile environment, potentially. South Carolina with the way that they, have been playing and really seem to be getting better every week. But, Clemson does control its own destiny, and it'll be interesting to see when that first college football playoff poll comes out, how things kind of shake out, because, when you look at the national picture, you look at the AP poll, I don't think it's going to look the same as the AP poll is looking right now, because I think there's going to be some more resume decisions that are made where maybe there's some teams now that their resume is not as strong or the metrics don't play as much in their favor. So I'm interested to see what that looks like for Clemson too, because Clemson, talked about strength of schedule. Clemson has strength of schedule. They're going down the line. They've got some good teams that they're going to play.
You got Louisville, you got Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh. That's going to help you. Yeah.
And South Carolina could help you. If you look at South Carolina's remaining schedule.
And I know that's hard for Clemson fans to want to pull for South Carolina. And I'm not telling you to pull for South Carolina, but it doesn't hurt that South Carolina goes and wins at Oklahoma. That doesn't hurt. Even though Oklahoma's bad this year, that still helps Clemson in the grand scheme of things.
If South Carolina wins this weekend, they're going to be in the top 25 if they win this weekend.
Well,
with Texas A&M ranked.
They're not going to win this weekend, but if they win next weekend, they're
next weekend. Sorry, next weekend. Yeah. Thinking ahead, but if they win when Texas A&M comes to town, who will be a ranked team, South Carolina is probably going to be in position to be ranked. If they can beat some teams that I think are very beatable, they could be a really big resume booster for Clemson potentially at the end of the year.
And here's the thing people need, and I just mentioned this scenario to Coach Bowden, talking about like what does that South Carolina game or games like that mean to teams like Clemson and Georgia that are in position to go to the college football playoff when they play their non-conference arch rival that last week of the regular season. But for Clemson, it does mean something because you have that one loss to Georgia. And yes, the conference championship, you go and win that, you're automatically in. But like you said, you want to give yourself some wiggle room to where if you're playing possibly, if Miami goes undefeated, you're playing a top 5 Miami team, maybe top 3, right? And so you want to give yourself wiggle room where if you win that game, of course you're in and everything's fine. But if you lose it, you want to be in position where you make the playoffs still, where you can at least make the playoffs. So if Clemson's sitting at 5, 6, or 7, you got to think that's enough room to where they're going to be in the playoffs. But so playing that South Carolina game is huge in the sense that Clemson doesn't want to lose it because then they fall back. And if they lose back-to-back weeks, then they're not going to the college football playoff.
Yeah. Also my thoughts about that rivalry, those out of conference rivalry games at the end of the season, I think it's going to become commonplace in the next couple of years for all of those games to move to the front of the schedule. Mm-hmm. Because that's just the way it's going. We've seen a couple this year already that were played in September or early October. And I think part of the reason that that's going to happen is so that you don't have a scenario where you're having to, potentially rest a guy in a game that means a lot to your fan base. So don't be surprised if in the next few years, this isn't coming from obviously any inside information, but don't be surprised in the coming years if this isn't a topic of conversation with Florida, Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina, some of those out-of-conference games that are traditionally played at the end of the year. Don't be surprised if people are talking about moving them earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that happening because and then here's another thing that's going on. You hear the talk about the SEC and the Big Ten, maybe the Big Ten wants to merge, they want to not merge, but basically – the SEC goes to 9 conference games so they both can play 9 conference games and then play against each other in non-conference games.
Yep.
Now, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida are fighting it on the SEC side. And, of course, there's a couple of teams, Michigan, I think, is one because Michigan plays Notre Dame and so does Southern Cal. They're fighting it on the Big Ten side. Now, Ohio State, they're Ohio State and everything. They don't care. They just want to be, and Alabama doesn't care, So they're having to fight against those other big schools because they want to merge kind of these two teams into where they play 3 games against each other in non-conference, and then they play their conference games, and really leaves everybody else out. And they feel like that the whole point of that is so they get a bigger contract, because they'll have the bigger games. And so this is something to watch and pay attention to. Now, again, a lot of schools in the SEC are against it because of the rivalry games, and couple schools in the Big Ten are against it because of the rivalry games. Oregon's another one that's against it as well. Because in Washington,
Texas now doesn't have to worry about it anymore because they got Oklahoma in their.
They're like Alabama, Auburn, right? Like Ohio State. Ohio State doesn't worry about it because they got Michigan, so they don't care.
Oklahoma maybe could be, kind of concerned about it because they, have committed to wanting to play the Bedlam game going forward.
I mean, let's think about it. In all, most of the time, name a team Ohio State plays out of conference. That's a big-time college football program from another conference.
Bart Boatwright would say they play the Ohio Bobcats every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, they don't pay anybody, right? I mean,
exactly.
They don't. And Alabama, for the most part, It's the same way. Like, when's the last time, up until a few years ago, Alabama went on the road to play a non-conference game somewhere, right?
Yeah.
They always play at a neutral site. If they do
Until
play
they played at Texas last year,
right? They don't do that. They just don't do that normally. And, so that's kind of what we're saying here. Like, you don't see Alabama go play LSU. Well, they can't because they're conference game. But you don't see Alabama come to Clemson. That's what I'm saying. You don't see Ohio State go to Georgia often enough. And so those two teams don't care because their main rivals in the conference already, in Auburn and then in Michigan. Where Michigan cares because Michigan, they play Notre Dame every year, almost every year. You see – Southern Cal plays Notre Dame. You see Oregon has to play Oregon State, and so everybody else does it. And so Ohio State and Alabama, which I think are the two teams behind this whole thing with the Sankey and the Big Ten commissioner as well. And that's just my opinion. I'm not saying that I know that for a fact, but I just got a feeling that Alabama and Ohio State are leading the charge on this. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, you'd think it'd definitely be the top dogs in the league that are kind of leading that charge. And, I don't even think that Georgia would spearhead an effort like that because I think Georgia does like having the occasional game against Clemson, the game against Georgia Tech. So, yeah, I mean, you look at your number of teams that could be spearheading the charge are pretty few and far between.
Yeah, let's look at it this way. Look at COVID for an example, okay, the COVID season. Clemson, and I believe Georgia Tech, and I believe Florida State were all hosting that year, or maybe Louisville was, maybe it's the other way around. We're all hosting that year of the COVID game. And the powers that be in the SEC, they said, well, we don't want to really, we don't need, and we don't need to play that game.
It's not safe for South Carolina to go 90 miles up the road. It's safer for them to go to Texas to play Texas A&M.
Exactly. That's how ridiculous it was. And you want to know the real reason why they did it, Alex, was because the ACC was going to get the money for the Clemson-South Carolina game that year, not the SEC. That's the real reason why that game was canceled. It had nothing to do with COVID. SEC did not want to lose that money. They had an opportunity to get the money and keep the ACC from getting the money because Clemson had to end up playing Virginia. And South Carolina, like you just said, went to Texas A&M. So who got the most money? Right?
I'd say it probably wasn't Clemson, Virginia.
It wasn't Clemson, Virginia. So that's my point. And it was strictly a money decision. And the SEC, if that game was played in Columbia that year, that game would have been played. There's no doubt in my mind it would have been played. And to South Carolina's credit, they fought it. I know you've heard rumors that they didn't. South Carolina did. Ray Tanner fought for that game. He did not want to lose. So did Georgia and Georgia Tech. In Florida, they fought for that game as well. So a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, well, they didn't fight for it." South Carolina did fight for it. They did not want.
And Kentucky as well.
And Kentucky as well
with Louisville.
They fought for it, and so people out there, I know some people thought that they blamed it on South Carolina because they didn't fight for it. No, South Carolina wanted to keep the streak alive too because they're on that same side of the rivalry. They're proud of the rivalry just like Clemson is. So anyway. Man, I could go on and on about this subject, Alex. I get fired up when Greg Sankey comes into my head.
Yeah, I know. We had Coach Bowden on, which is a recipe for a long show because we could talk to Coach Bowden forever. And, now we're talking about rivalry games and the future of college football, which is another topic that we can go an hour on.
Yes.
But fortunately, with a bye week, you technically get two shows for the price of one because there's no Clemson game this week, and you're getting a special show.
Right,
and you get another one next week.
Yeah, and you get
another one next week to get you ready for football to come back for the Tigers.
Absolutely. So, well, guys, we appreciate you listening and watching us, and we appreciate all the nice comments for Coach Bowden and comments for the interview, and we do appreciate you guys, and we appreciate you watching us. We got a big show lined up again next week as well, and we'll be talking about a big game with Louisville as the Cardinals come to town. And that's going to be a big one for Clemson, as Louisville's going to be a very formidable opponent. So for Coach Bowden, for Alex Dodd, I'm Will Vandervoort. We'll talk to you next time on Believe in Clemson Football.